Well, the agency with a rather peculiar name, Let's Eat Grandpa, helps interpret and understand consumers' conversations with brands and how to convert them into strategic insights. Here to shed some light on the subject is Hayley Lamberti, MD of Let's Eat Grandpa, Neill Higgs, Director of TNS Research Surveys, and this week's guest host, Michael Goldman from GIBS. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hayley, to start off with you, what's up with this name, Let's Eat Grandpa?
Yes, we do have a rather unusual name. And when designing our company's CI, we decided that information can be interpreted in many different ways, and often what you're looking for is the right interpretation for your client's business. And of course, punctuation helps us to interpret information differently. Depending on how a sentence is punctuated, it can mean too many very different things. So Let's Eat Grandpa is an example of 3 words that can be interpreted very differently depending on how it is punctuated.
Sure. Let's get to the subject. Market insights. Why is that so important to know that when preparing brand strategies?
Well, I think if you really want your marketing campaign to resonate with your target market and your consumers, you need to find that one insight that is going to really connect with them. You need to understand their decision-making process and how they arrive at the decisions they do. And that insight will often will be the basis for that. And if you have a sound insight, it'll be the basis for your marketing strategy, and it'll help to move your business forward.
But Michael, consumers change their minds all the time.
They do. That's the problem. It would be great if we found the insights and then they just kept having that insight all the time, but they don't. And I mean, I'm sure you'd agree. There's so many organizations that set up with their marketing campaigns and marketing strategies, and they haven't got that very clear idea of what their target market really thinks about something, really thinks about their products, their services, their brand. So those insights are critical. And if you don't have that, you're really starting at a disadvantage.
How do you go about getting those insights from a research point of view, Neill?
I think there's lots of ways of doing it. Normally it would start off with an exploratory phase where you'd speak to people one-on-one. We believe quite strongly in immersions, ethnography, going into people's homes or where they're doing whatever it is that you're interested in, and walking in their moccasins, so to speak, before going out on large-scale surveys. And what we interestingly find is that people's behaviors don't change maybe as quickly as you think. And how fast the attitudes change to brands very much depends on whether a brand's an old trusted brand. I mean, you can think of brands that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years, or whether it's a new kid on the block. And I think finding how those new brands fit into the old brand frameworks, you've got to start by walking into people's homes and looking at how they live. Something I don't think our marketers do enough of.
But now, Hayley, isn't the key from your side is to try and change those conversations with brands to suit the actual brand?
Well,
and how would you go about that?
I think the idea is to understand how the conversation around your brand is changing and to feed that information back to your clients so that they understand how their consumers are moving and they can therefore adapt their strategy accordingly.
And what tools can you apply? You know, what tools can you actually give a brand or assist with a brand to enable that?
Well, obviously they're the more traditional research tools that we know and love, focus groups, ethnography, one-on-one interviews. But of course, with modern technology, there are many new ways in which we can reach our consumers, and we can get quick feedback on social networks using mobile phones, that kind of thing. So there are both new and old techniques to use.
Michael, when do you know when is the right method to use? When to use a focus group rather than an interview, a personal interview?
I think marketing managers need to sit down and say, how much of this do we need to do in-house and how much can we bring in the experts to help us think about some of these things? And they have a lot of experience in working in these specific tools and techniques, which sometimes marketing managers are a little bit far away from. They understand the broad strategic view, but they don't really know exactly how the research works. And so it is important to use the experts. I think it's about relying on them for that, but ultimately marketing managers need to have a sense, as Neill suggests, is how close am I to my customers? Do I really, really understand how they live their lives every single day? And if I'm far, far away, I need to spend a lot of time and effort to really understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think there's been a move away from the more sterile kinds of research environment where you take people out of their normal situation and put them into an office or a room, and a much greater move into visiting people where they actually are
Do you find that executives are very comfortable, though, heading out of their comfortable spaces, out of their offices, and going and living and spending time with the customers?
A lot depends on the client company, Michael. Some companies are very much big into immersions. Sometimes it's a bit stage managed for my personal preference. I mean, I'm in the townships in informal squatter camps on a weekly basis, and I'm stunned at how many people are not, and they're marketing to those very people. What chance have you got of marketing to a person in a shack unless you've actually been to that shack and the wind is howling and there's a toilet down there and there's water over there?
It's almost like a shotgun approach.
Yeah, and I think it really gives people, sometimes they come back with their eyes wide open after this kind of immersion, and I think that kind of aha moment leads to the kind of insights that Hayley's talking about. And then you can interpret the research, I think, with much better glasses.
And that interpretation is so critical, because you're going to get lots and lots of qualitative feedback from this research. You really need to apply your mind to say, well, what out of that is a real insight, and get those creative people that sit in the agencies and sit in many of our organizations, get the creative people to really think about what are people saying and what are they not saying and what's behind what they're saying.
That's right, and execute it accordingly. Let's quickly touch on the subject of seeding. What is your take on seeding, Hayley?
Well, I think seeding is great because you choose influential people around within the market that you've defined, and it allows your brand to live within their world for a period of time, and for them to experience it, and then through word of mouth, we know how amazing word of mouth is in terms of spreading the news about your brand. And if it's a positive or negative message, you need to know what people are saying about your brand so that you can then manage your response. And seeding is a great tool to support your other campaigns, whether they're above the line or in store, and it's been very effective.
I mean, the choice of person, I guess, is critical.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, in the
It
same
could go
way,
either way.
sponsorship
It
could
could
be
be
really
risky,
problematic.
couldn't
Yeah,
it?
I mean, the risks are huge, aren't they?
Absolutely.
You're almost leaving your brand in someone else's hands.
That's why the selection of the seeders is so very important.
It's key.
You need to find someone who, where within their conversation, it's natural for them to talk about the products. It cannot be forced. It needs to be presented in such a way that people will be open to listening to it. It also needs to be something that's new, something that's interesting for them to talk about.
And you need to trust that person.
And you need to trust the person. And as I say, the choice of the person is critical for the success of the campaign.
Okay, thank you. Despite the jargony name, crowdsourcing is a very real and important business idea, as it allows you to tap into the collective intelligence of the public to complete business-related tasks. While our reporter from Cape Town, Talia Sanhewe, caught up with Spring Leap to see how this concept came about.
Spring Leap is an e-commerce company with a difference. What started out as an online retail business selling custom-designed t-shirts to the local and international market has turned into a springboard into the cutting-edge world of social media and crowdsourcing. This Cape Town-based company was started a little under 2 years ago with the idea of providing a unique product offering. T-shirt designers and graphic designers from all over the world are encouraged to submit t-shirt designs online, where the top design is voted for by the public. The t-shirts are then made and sold on the internet.
We kept on getting an influx of amazing artists from all over the world coming to us and saying, we want to produce t-shirts, not just have the t-shirts that are sold in your stores. And we decided, wow, there's a fantastic opportunity here. Let's actually take a step backwards and see if we can be the provider of the platform where this occurs for the artists as well as the people who want to support them.
Through its user-friendly interface, Twitter following and Facebook page, springleap.com has developed a strong online following who, as a community, have become a powerful marketing research tool, a tool that Spring Leap has defined and packaged as crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing is a methodology by which you match people with creative requirements and people who have the ability to create those requirements, but you do it through a community. So for example, in the case of Spring Leap, we have thousands of artists from all over the world who are creatively incredibly adept, and then we have our requirement, which is to create an awesome t-shirt, or the requirements of other creative companies such as Saatchi, AMD, the large micro device company, or Markham, any of these guys that we've worked with in the past. And they have a creative requirement. Instead of going to a small section of people, let's say a small design studio, they're able to come to us and interact with thousands of designers from all over the world and cherry pick the top designs, as well as get our community voting and telling them which ones they really like and want to support.
Springleaf's burgeoning success in the social media space and crowdsourcing arena captured the imagination of an angel investor who decided to invest 4 million rand into the research and development of a new crowdsourcing software platform. Springleaf plans to tailor its crowdsourcing techniques into a unique value proposition for businesses. As an e-commerce venture, the world is their oyster, and with that, Springleaf plans to take crowdsourcing to the next level by going global. No small feat for a company that started selling t-shirts online, but is now taking the global social marketing space by storm. No surprises then that the company's name has become its destiny.
So what was interesting in this segment for me, and what was key, is that you need a community, right? So whether it's designers, like we just saw in the pack, or whether it's a creative community, or even your customers. So Michael, what do you think? What is your take on crowdsourcing?
I think crowdsourcing is a concept that isn't necessarily new. I think the web has made it a little bit easier, and certainly it's in the web 2.0 space is a lot sexier. But the idea of getting a bunch of your customers or your employees or your suppliers to tell you what they think about something, that's gone on for a while. So I think crowdsourcing has gained a lot of traction, a lot of interest, and certainly South African and international companies have been doing it for a while. It's interesting, you know, Springleaf has had a really interesting 2 years, and good luck to them. But Threadless has been doing this exactly the same model in the US for 10 years, and they've been very successful, and they've taught the business, the market, really how to do this kind of thing. So I'm excited about it. I guess the key thing about crowdsourcing is you have to understand where to use it and where not to use it, because there are some specific risks, and it's got to be fit for purpose.
Neill, what would you say would be the benefits to crowdsourcing?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because at the SAMRA conference recently, we had an expert from overseas out, excuse me, and one of our youngsters also presented a paper on crowdsourcing, highlighting this exact point. Mark Earls from Herd overseas has been using it with great success, and I think the conventional wisdom is that you can use either expert communities, or you can use the general public. We're just doing a fun one at the moment within our own group of people at the office, looking at people's predictions about the World Cup, and we're using a very classical technique. We're saying, if you all had shares in all the teams, which teams would you buy shares in, which teams would you sell shares in? That's an example of one of the basic, very simple crowdsourcing techniques. And I think, you know, as Michael says, it can be quite accurate, but you've got to be careful, because maybe it's not representative. Maybe people are just making up stuff using opinions of others, but it's an extension of the old Delphi technique, really.
Because let's talk about the risks. What are the risks involved here?
Well, I think you've got to understand what is the purpose behind the crowdsourcing campaign. If it's about generating ideas and about getting lots and lots of people to give you lots of new ideas from a diverse audience or from a diverse target market that you don't normally reach, crowdsourcing is perfect. It's a low-cost way to do that. You're reaching out to the community, and if it's a well-constructed community, you're getting some really diverse and good views. And Netflix has done that, Vegemite in Australia have done that really successfully. Google does that every year with interesting new applications. But if you're trying to use crowdsourcing to find the best solution, so to get the community to vote, for example, so not just divergent, but to get convergence, to get them to agree on one great idea, then the whole issue of how knowledgeable that community becomes much more important. And we've seen some great examples, you know, where it really doesn't work. If you require the mob, instead of the crowd, the mob that are uninformed to make some decisions on behalf of your company, you could go really wrong.
Hayley, crowdsourcing, yes or no?
I think yes, but I think you need to approach it with some caution. It needs to be well designed. You need to know what your objective is.
If it's the consumer, they should be loyal. I mean, that is key, because leaving something in your consumer's hands who are not marketers or strategists, you know, by profession, that could be a big risk.
And the research experts will tell us about sampling and about representativity, and you've got to have the right people in that community. So what Vegemite did in Australia, they were looking for a new kind of campaign around their brand, new flavors, etc., how to improve the brand. It's a very Australian meal, as we know. And they got their loyal customers to participate in this, and they won some prizes. And there were thousands and thousands of loyal Vegemite Australians, you can just picture it, giving all these new ideas. And so it works because they are loyal consumers.
Right.
If you had to ask the typical South African about Vegemite, you probably would get very wrong kind of ideas.
Sure.
And so it is about making those choices on who you're going to bring in that community.
I do think, though, that one must bear in mind that the focus isn't on the individual, it's what the individual thinks will work. So you're kind of projecting what you think a community might in fact go for. So it's a very different approach. It's requiring a bit of a projection.
Yeah.
Also
That's the wisdom of crowds thinking.
Yes.
You know, I mean, James Sawaski wrote that book a few years ago, really around understanding that in a prediction markets type environment, the wisdom of crowds could be more important than a few experts. That's useful in certain cases, and we need to understand. You've got to think cleverly about those cases.
Yeah, let's leave it there for now. Thank you. It's time to pay a few bills, so we will do just that. After the break, we take a look at how mobile has become a phenomenon in the emerging countries. Plus, we take you behind the scenes for a look at the new Carling Black Label TV commercial. See you after this.